Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Supreme Court Justice safe and in his home, well protected from a mad gunman. Thank goodness that mad gunman called local police saying he was having suicidal thoughts. They were able to dispatch police to intercept. He has been arrested, charged with attempted murder, and of course, the rules we put into place to protect our justices. Now, this person did have a gun, did have a suitcase, was angry about the leaked memo, so crisis averted, I guess. This has got Mitch McConnell saying we got to do something to protect our Supreme Court justices. Got to move quickly. Can I just throw it out there? Can we move this quickly for our kids? As I tweeted out earlier, Brett Kavanaugh can feel safe when our kids feel safe. Sorry, I'm not saying people should go rushing to Brett Kavanaugh's house, but priorities, folks, priorities. We're in a moment right now, and this is not, I can't believe we have to talk about this, but it doesn't seem the sense of urgency is the same. Doesn't seem like we the people matter much to the McConnells and the folks in our halls of power. Boy, when it's one of them, when it's their ilk, immediate action. How quickly did they move forth on a piece of legislation to protect the Supreme Court justices? We still don't have what we need for our kids, do we? No. They've ramped up protection for all of the justices. They've ramped up protection. What about our kids? Now, look, I'm not one to say, hey, go after. I'm not. It's not what I'm saying. I am saying that we need to be doing more. Now, the House of Representatives, they did their jobs today. Passed a piece of legislation that, we desperately need. The Protect Our Children Act. Protecting Our Kids Act. Simple. Would do a couple of simple things that need to be done. Raise the age, the purchasing age to buy a semi-automatic weapon. And I would argue not have someone buy it for you and then, here, you can have it. Also, it would there'd ban the import, sale, manufacture, transfer, and possession of large capacity magazines. Again, this is one of those, it seems kind of almost a no-brainer to me, because this seems to be an ongoing problem. Would establish and regulate storage of firearms on residential premises. I got to see the details in this. I think this is going to get a huge blowback. Create penalties for violations. Something I've said for a very long time. Create responsibility. If you have a gun in the home, that gun is misused, you are responsible. We aren't that society anymore. We don't seem to hold people accountable and responsible for things anymore. This may be a way forward. Seems sane, seems reasonable, probably why it's not going to happen. Also, they're going to build on bans of ghost guns, bump stocks, things like that. All of this stuff seems fairly reasonable to me. That's why it's probably not going to pass. It will die in the Senate. And everyone seems to agree that that's going to happen. The vote was 223 to 204, mostly on party lines. You had 5 Republicans, Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio, who is no longer going to be in Congress after the end of this term, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Adam Kinzinger, who also will no longer be in Congress at the end of this, Chris Jacobs, and Fred Upton of Michigan, Jacobs of New York. 2 Democrats voted against it. Kurt Schrader of Oregon and Jared Golden of Maine. This going to probably die in the Senate. The Senate is working on its own package, something I'm sure that is going to be much more watered down. Going to happen. And I think this is where my concern is. My concern is the Democrats have to get something. There has to be some kind of legislation that gets through, and they're going to agree to just about anything, I think, and just to get it through. And it'll depend on what happens in the House as well. I'm hoping for some teeth in this, because here's where my fear is. My fear is we go, hooray, we got something done. It's going to get watered down. It's going to have very little teeth. It's going to have very little action to it. And then the next time something happens, and there will be a next time, the gun crowd is going, see, didn't work. And this is what happens when you do half measures. When you get half measures, you set yourself up for what you know is coming. We see this movie. Let's not fall into that trap. That's simple. That's simple for me. So on this gun issue, I'm hoping they get it right. I'm hoping they do the right thing. I'm hoping the Senate does come around, because there's been some talk of maybe possibly, there's a lot of high hopes that this time Lucy's going to leave the football for Charlie Brown. I'm not buying it. Let's get a call from Julie in Minneapolis, listening on KTNF AM 950 in Minneapolis. Julie, what's on your mind?
Hi, Rick. I'm a little skeptical like you. I'm a little cynical. I'm glad they're working on it. I hope something happens, but what is the old saying? Hope is not a strategy. The strategy is voting. What is the strategy, though, to get the non-voters, tens of millions of people? Some of them came out because they couldn't stand Trump, and, hey, I'm going to vote for Biden because Biden is not Trump. What can we do to inspire people to vote on this gun issue? What do you think it would take? What do you think are some good ideas? I'll hang up and listen.
I appreciate the call, Julie. I mean, ultimately, the reality is I listened to Matthew McConaughey's speech yesterday, and look, I'm not a huge Matthew McConaughey fan. There's some crazy stuff that he does, but he was spot on yesterday when he was telling stories of these children. If that doesn't move you into saying, we need some action, if listening to the story about the little girl and her green Converse tennis shoes, and that being the way that the family had to identify that body, if that doesn't move you to say these weapons shouldn't be in the hands of just anyone, if that doesn't move you to some kind of action, if not to protect your own children, I mean, if you don't care about somebody else's, what about your own children or your own grandchildren or yourself? This stuff is happening way too frequently. And I know I've got friends who say, well, this is the cost of living in a free society, Rick. No, it's not. The founding fathers never envisioned the kind of weaponry that we have at our disposal. They never imagined the kind of destructive capacity that is at our fingertips. And I've talked about this before. Every one of us agree on gun control. Everyone agree that there should be. The conversation we're not having right now is where we draw the line. We're being led, and this is masterful tacticians at work distracting us from what really the problem is here. The problem is the ease of access of military grade weaponry that are made for killing people. I'm sorry, this AR-15, this is not made for you to go out and hunt squirrel with or feral pigs. Sorry, that's not what it's for. This is a machine of carnage. And we've got to have that conversation. I'm not talking about the father and son who go out and with the .22 in the backyard and shoot cans off the fence, or I'm talking about the weapons that are meant for killing. Pure and simple. and I've said this before, I grew up in an area where if you saw somebody with a gun, run. Somebody's going to die. Had you put, and I think back to my own childhood, had you put that weapon in my hands at that age, who knows what I would have been capable of doing given any number of situations. The easy and availability of these things in desperate moments creates opportunities for what we're seeing. And I'm sorry, I don't think we should have these things so easily available. I think you have a right absolutely to it, but that right should come with some barrier, some obstacle that you have to meet. There should be some training involved in this. You should be required to, I believe in the well-regulated part of this. The fact that I can go and I can grab one of these things and have absolutely no training whatsoever and walk around with it in the rest of civil society without any concern for others is stupid. I've said this a couple of times. I'll probably say it a couple hundred more times. I watched this video of this Rittenhouse kid with an automatic weapon. And I'm going, the founders could not have fathomed that kind of power in the hands of someone like that. Or worse. So for me, this is about having a conversation. I don't want to infringe on someone's right to protect themselves or protect their homes or whatever it is that they do. But there's a moment where you go, there's a line. And the conversation should be where that line is, not all the distractions about, should a schoolhouse have only one door? Is it about, should we show pictures or shouldn't we? There's so much here. And for me, it's about the gun. And this is where I think we need to have that conversation and engage people. And engage them on, how do we keep our kids safe? The fact that there are 19 little boys and girls who went to school with hopes and dreams, 19 little boys and girls who had futures ahead of them that ended in one bloody day, with families that are now going to be tortured for the rest of their days. If that doesn't motivate you, if that doesn't touch your soul, if that doesn't viscerally move you to action, I don't know what to say and what to do. For me, as someone who is compassionate, empathetic, I don't know what else can move you. As someone who has 3 kids of my own who cannot imagine what it would be like to have to wake up the next day without one of them, I don't know. I don't know what would then motivate you to say, hey, sorry you lost that kid there in the most horrific way possible, but it's my right. It's my right. It's the cost of your loss is the cost of my freedom. I don't know. How do you make that argument to someone? If you've got a thought, I'd love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. You can also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm not sure how you make that. Although the NRA, I'm sure, and the gun owners of America, I'm sure they've got a PR line and a distraction and maybe a bulletproof backpack that would maybe help ease our pain. Crazy stuff. Quick break, right back. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Our quote of the day, North Carolina Lieutenant Governor. And this, again, is one of those moments where you go, exactly why? But the North Carolina Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, said, when we are called to be led by men. By men, he says, God sent women out when they had to do their thing, but when it was time to face down Goliath, they sent David, not Davida. David. I love religious people. Speaking of crazy religious people, put this guy on your calendar. Pastor Dylan Oz, that's his name, A-W-E-S, Oz, of the Steadfast Baptist Church in Hurst, Texas. According to the pastor in Hurst, Texas, every gay person should be lined up and shot in the back of the head. And, the first thing, I thought a couple of things, to be honest. The first thing is, wow, you protest too much. Hiding something there, buddy? Put him on the calendar. A couple of years, we may be hearing a lot about him. The second thing is, what a coward. You're going to shoot him in the back of the head, not even going to look him in the eye. That's these folks right here. But the weird thing is, using the Bible as his justification. You never mind that those rules that they want plastered everywhere. Thou shalt not murder. They're advocating mass murder. Yeah, and they're doing it with guns. So you think you're going to get help from the Christians, or at least these crazy ones? Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on line one. Alice, how are we doing tonight?
We're doing. I am just flabbergasted, but not really, that these whack jobs, and let's just be blunt, they are whack jobs, can sit there on their pulpit or on Fox News or ON or Newsmax or wherever, their own little podcast, and literally say, we're going to go out and we're going to kill the witches and go kill the gays and we're going to kill the transgendered and the Democrats, and nothing happens. But then, they all just blow it off, and they're like, oh, well, theatrics. And then you end up with some person that goes to Kavanaugh's house, and they just about go spastics. But never mind that there's little kids being slaughtered and teachers being slaughtered and the whole 9 yards. But, we just have to keep those Christian values. What values they are, I have no clue, because I'm at the point it's like, I'm confused here. What values are we espousing today? Because you're telling me one thing, doing another, and I'm confused. But I guess we're all confused, Rick, so yeah. I don't know.
No, it is what it is. What's the Gandhi was reported of saying? I like your Christ, your Christians not so much?
Exactly. That's exactly he said. I like your Christ, but not your Christianity. I don't like it so much, or something like that. You were right, in the gist of the matter. But yeah, I truly have come to the conclusion, and of course, some of my local whack jobs, because our little rural county has been taken over by the new religious right, and they're literally sending people things in the mail. I, honest to God, opened a letter. I was like, who in the hell's this from? I opened it up, and it was like, do you know Jesus? I was like, are you kidding me? But, I was ready to write him back and go, I didn't know he was lost. But it's just insane. And they told me, while I was speaking to one in the shop and save, and they had on, the paraphernalia and the whole 9 yards, and they were telling me basically that, our nation is just, we need to get back to those Christian values, because that's what the founding fathers, and my husband's poking me in the back going, keep your mouth shut, don't, and I just, I was boiling. You have a good evening.
Thank you, Alice. And just don't get shot in the parking lot. But no, this is one of those things, and these are the people who tell us that, follow us, follow our example, look at us. This is what's scary. I always believed religion was about making us better, making us want to be better people. When I grew up in the Catholic Church, it was about peace and social justice and love thy neighbor and your brother's keeper and all of those things, extending a hand. This is crazy. This guy literally came out and said, what does God say the answer is the solution for homosexuality in 2022? He says it's here in the New Testament in the book of Romans. They are worthy of death, he says. These people should be put to death. Every single homosexual in our country should be charged with the crime, the abomination of homosexuality that they have. They should be convicted at a lawful trial with him on the jury. They should be sentenced to death. They should be lined up against the wall and shot in the back of the head. That's what God teaches, he said. And I'm sitting here going, who in their right mind listens to this blather? It's one thing for some crackpot to be spewing this at the front of the whatever it is that they have. It's one thing for him to be shooting off like this kind of insanity. It's a whole nother thing to have people sitting, listening, and absorbing this and nodding their head with their mouths open, absorbing it. This is a problem. And I would argue, and at some point we've got to get to a point where there's got to be some accountability for this kind of language, this kind of incitement of violence against people. There's something seriously wrong with Pastor Dylan Oz. Now, like I said, is this his cry for help? Is this him, hiding himself deep in some dark closet? Which, hey, Dylan, come on out. You're okay. You'll be fine. You don't have to project so much. And then the perversion of the Bible. I mean, I don't know which book he's reading, but it's not the same one I grew up reading. What happened to love thy neighbor? What happened to feeding the hungry and healing, helping the sick and visiting the imprisoned? And what happened to helping the downtrodden? Not kicking them, not abusing. I'm struggling because we are becoming this. I would argue we are this society that is horribly abusive. And mentally deranged. I mean, this is a sickness. This is a sickness. And anybody who goes to this Steadfast Baptist Church, you need to get some help. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center has labeled them a hate group. I got to tell you, judging from that, I don't know how you can come up with anything else. I don't know how you come up with anything else. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. It's crazy stuff. If you miss any of today's program or any of our programs, make sure you download the podcast at the website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Quick break, right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day the Granite Mountain and Speculator mines in Butte, Montana caught fire, killing 168 miners. It is considered the worst underground hard rock mining disaster in the nation's history. Just weeks after the U.S. had entered World War I, the demand for copper had surged. Granite Mountain, like many of the nation's mines, operated around the clock to meet war production needs. In his book, Fire and Brimstone, The North Butte Mining Disaster of 1917, Michael Punke notes the irony of the disaster, which began as an effort to improve safety. A sprinkler system had just been installed. The final task was the relocation of an electrical cable. The cable was insulated with oil-soaked cloth sheathed in lead. Workers lost control of the 3-ton cable as
they lowered it into the mine and it fell to the bottom of the shaft. Carrying a commonly used carbide burning lamp, the night shift foreman accidentally ignited the cable as he planned its removal. The conflagration was virtually immediate and burned for more than 3 days. At the time, 415 miners were at work on the overnight shift. Smoke and gases quickly filled both mines. With no alarm system in place, those that could not escape succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning. In 1996, a memorial plaza was dedicated to those who lost their lives. It details a slice of Butte's mining and labor history that culminated in tragedy.
The suffering and the pain we remember to this day. The
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Rick Smith here, host of The Rick Smith Show. You know, Father's Day is just around the corner. And if your dad is as hard to find a gift for as my wife and kids claim that I am, here's a little gift-giving wisdom from our friends at Omaha Steaks. Dads want steaks. It's true. We do. Every holiday in my house, it's the same thing. Dad, what do you want for this holiday? And, I always give the same thing. Give me a hug and spend a little time with me. I don't need ties or cologne or any of that stuff. And now, thanks to Omaha Steaks, they ask, Dad, what do you want? Steaks. Give me the Dads Want Steaks package. Just go to omahasteaks.com, type Rick Smith in the search bar, and order the Dads Want Steaks package. And for just $99, this limited time package includes 16 mouth-watering entrees that I love, and I guarantee he'll love too. The smoky, tender, bacon-wrapped filet mignons, the gourmet jumbo franks, their air-chilled, boneless chicken breast, and of course my favorite, the thick, delicious, boneless pork chops. And to finish it off, the sweet finish of it all, the delicious caramel apple tartlets. And as a special gift for my listeners, when you type Rick Smith in the search bar and order the Dads Want Steaks package, you'll also get 8 free Omaha Steaks burgers. These are awesome. You throw them on the grill, cook them to perfection. These burgers are full of bold, beefy flavor, made from 100% Omaha steaks, and now they're bigger than ever, a whopping 6 ounces. So this Father's Day, don't wait. Send Dad more than just a gift. Send him an experience he'll love and can share with you. In fact, don't just order one. Get 2 Dads Want Steaks packages. One for him and one he can share with you. Just go to omahasteaks.com and type Rick Smith in the search bar and get the Dads Want Steaks package. You won't regret it. I guarantee it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I got to tell you, this Dylan Oz, I hate to even call him a pastor, but this whole, we just got to kill the gays. At least Ohio is not talking about killing the gays and the transgenders. They just want them to drop their drawers and inspections. I guess that's the new thing that's going on, because I think Ohio's going to have their own hate transgender athletes bill coming up soon. And I guess they're going to carry curtains around where they're going to do inspections, some kind of craziness like this. Is there nothing else in Ohio that has to be done? Are there no roads and bridges? Are there no education facilities that need to be redone? Is there nothing in Ohio that needs to be done, or anywhere else? I don't know. I'm here to share some thoughts on maybe Ohio's perfect, and we have time to go do other crazy stuff. That's why I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David's a former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
So am I getting this right? We're going after the transgenders, and the athletes going to set up little curtained areas to do inspections on demand.
Yeah, it passed the Ohio State House. Now, let's hope it doesn't pass the Senate or the governor sign it. But yeah, it's insanity. It wasn't just a ban. It was basically if somebody suspects that any girl on a a high school or any age team, if they somehow think that their performance, sticks out in a way that they should get a test, they can demand it. And they go through a multi-stage process that includes, I don't even like to talk about it, but physical, external, and internal inspections of that girl's genitals. I mean, that is literally what they passed. And I believe every single Republican member of the House voted yes. It's off the charts nuts.
As a parent, I don't even know how I would react to that other than with just absolute anger. I mean, especially,
I agree.
Especially if your daughter isn't, especially if because how many transgender athletes do you have in the entire state?
One.
You got one.
There was one. And because of the one, and obviously you're seeing literally transgender kids talk about suicide around the country. So the bullying of those kids is awful. But we're talking about subjecting, hundreds, thousands of girls all around this state to some state. This is Orwell wouldn't think of this for his book. It's so over the top. But again, they have a specific process outlined, and they pass the bill. And we'll see. I think the outrage, I hope, although it doesn't stop other terrible ideas. But again, they voted yes, and this is my view is this is why it's so important that Democrats get smart about running in every district, because no one who passed that bill in the next election should get a pass. No one should have an uncontested race. Everyone in their district should know they voted for that, because every parent, and I say this as a father of two boys who I just put to bed, 5 and 8-year-old, every parent in this state should be appalled, disgusted, and disturbed that people voted for this. And there aren't a lot of issues these days that break through, but they're getting so extreme. They're actually now finding the issues that might cost them elections, even in gerrymandered districts.
Now,
and that's why it's on us to challenge them. We can't just talk about it. We got to run against these people everywhere.
I've been saying that for years, but is this only applied to girls?
I can't remember the exact language, but that's sort of the context of it is transgender girls playing, and so that's basically seems to be the worry that's who it would apply to. And then and you, by the way, how I don't want to put this on parents and start blaming them. This was the politicians, but think about all the situations where some girl's really performing incredibly well. She's faster than everybody by a lot. Are we going to literally start having like coach challenges of a girl who just happens to be doing a great thing in a sport? I mean, that's literally the prospect that they put together here, and it's appalling.
And having a little tent off to the side, I can't even imagine where this takes us.
I mean, I'll just say this without sounding like some hothead. Again, my kids are sons, but like you come after me and start telling my kid you're gonna do this. No, you're not. I'm sorry, that's not happening in my family. And my guess is most parents would say the same thing. Like, keep far away from my kids with these crazy ideas of yours.
So you got nothing else to do in Ohio then, huh? This is the most important issue of the day?
Well, here is what's happening. And of course, there's so many things to deal with in Ohio right now. And this is going back to this book you mentioned that I wrote. Once you're in a world where almost to a person, these officials never worry about their next election because of gerrymandering, so many of the things that we think people in politics care about, like actually improving public outcomes, no longer matter. They are reelected whether or not they deliver good public outcomes. And so we continue across this country in these gerrymandered state houses, be it Texas or Florida or bills like this. Well, why aren't they working on those things? Because in a world of gerrymandering where every election basically is predetermined, it no longer matters to them if they deliver good public outcomes. If the schools are worse, if wages are lower, if they attack workers, they still get elected because they basically have drawn districts they can't lose. And that's why most of their work these days is no longer at all related to public service. And public outcomes are now disconnected from whether they got reelected. And that's why what you see in states like Ohio is a downward spiral that doesn't stop of extremism, of public outcomes, and of corruption. And going back to what I said before that you said that you agree with, until we start challenging the extremists and saying, no more free passes, we're going to take on your terrible outcomes, we're going to take on your corruption, we're going to take on bizarre extremism like this, they will keep going the wrong way. Right now, they feel like no matter, and they say it, no matter what they do, nothing will happen to their career. Until they feel otherwise, it's going to keep happening. We need to stop being shocked about it and start doing something about it.
Yeah, no, Ohio, one of the states that thought they did something about gerrymandering. You thought you passed some good legislation. I think an amendment to bipartisan commission, all kinds of stuff, and yet you've got one of the most gerrymandered maps in the country.
Yeah, they basically ignore. We have a true breakdown of the rule of law in Ohio. It wasn't the perfect reform. I mean, most people would say, and I agree, you'd rather have an independent commission, but we weren't going to get that. That was tried. It didn't happen. But we had clear standards and clear rules. And they, for a year, just violated them. And after the Ohio Supreme Court and a Republican Chief Justice said, you violated them, they just kept right on violating them. And we had 2 Trump appointees in a federal court the other day basically say, oh, it's okay, you get to violate the state constitution. So we're in a moment where we literally will have maps thrust on us for at least 2 years that the Ohio Supreme Court has ruled violated the Ohio Constitution multiple times. And again, why do they do that? Because in a world of a real democracy with fair districts, if you passed a law requiring inspections of little girls' genitals, you would lose the next election. And they know it. You can't be as extreme as they are and survive in fair districts. So the leaders especially know we can't be extremists if we have fair districts. So they are willing to violate the law, roll the dice, to continue this whole rigged system. That's what allows them to pass gun laws that are totally out of step with mainstream Ohio. It's what allows them to, we had literally one of the women who passed this inspection bill 2 weeks ago was saying publicly when asked, well, does your abortion ban cover rape? And again, this is disturbing to even repeat these words. She said, well, rape is an opportunity for that woman to deliver a baby. Again, in a fair district, that's the end of your career. You remember a couple of years ago, that's what the Indiana candidate and the Missouri Senate candidate said, and the races ended as soon as they said that. But in this world of gerrymandering, and they know this, they can get away with that stuff and not lose as toxic as their politics may be.
Yeah, Mean Gene Schmidt. Yeah,
exactly.
I wasn't surprised by it at all, to be honest with you. But
no.
But what happened?
You can tell she said that 100 times. It came right out like a talking point.
But what happened to the whole states' right thing? I mean, what happened to didn't they used to believe in that? I mean, how do you have a federal judge overturn the state's ability to
it's absurd. This is as rogue as Bush v. Gore. These are literally judges that came out of the Federalist Society saying, we don't care that the Ohio Supreme Court struck down these maps as violating the Ohio Constitution. We're going to actually impose an unconstitutional map on the state. So I do think they really, gave up the game here because this is the opposite of federalism. Even John Roberts a few years ago at a case in Wisconsin said federal courts should not get involved in partisan gerrymandering. And if it's a matter of state law, that's for the state Supreme Court to decide. I mean, that's only 4 years ago. And this court trashed that precedent, trashed federalism, and said to and let's be clear about this. And it sounds over the top, but it's a fact. This is the legislature that's been named by USA Today. Can you hear me?
Yeah, they are the most extreme and the most
corrupt, but corrupt too. We have a massive corruption scandal. So the corruption that led to the corruption scandal is the same corruption that led them to violate the law 5 times when it came to gerrymandering, the same illegal mindset. And a federal court said, we are going to reward your illegality by giving you that unconstitutional map. So a federal court is going along with the nation's most corrupt legislature. So we have a rule of law crisis. I mean, it's hard for me to to literally say to you, and I hate saying this, that we have a rule of law in Ohio. It's gone right now. Now, I do think, by the way, and this is sort of the next step, I honestly believe, so what happened was this legislature didn't even hide the fact their goal was run out the clock, ignore, defy the law for as long as possible, and then force the hand of a court to say, okay, it's too late, you get your legal map. That's what happened. But in running out the clock, let's be clear, they were violating the law the entire time.
Right.
And I think that should be a separate investigation. You don't just get to violate the law. Not only because it's your oath of the Constitution, there's a statute in Ohio, dereliction of duty, that says you can't just violate the law because you feel like it. I believe that the accountability has to still come in, that anyone who was part of this year-long plan to do this should be held accountable under the law, under a separate case.
No, I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. Highly suggest taking a look at that. I saw this story, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it. What did Canada ever do to Ohio? What's going on here?
I mean, Lake Erie isn't that big either. It's not like we're declaring, war on a faraway country. It's right in our face. So, yeah, Ohio. The other thing. So it was a banner week for the worst state house in the country. The inspection bill, what Gene Schmidt said the week before, but they passed a bill, or maybe it was a resolution, to add Canada to the watch list for violating freedom of religion, because the Ohio legislature, who's been horrific on COVID, did not like the way that Canada dealt with COVID when it came to their religious institutions. So we haven't put Russia on our watch list, I don't believe, but Canada. It's like that old, what's his Michael Moore, Blame Canada, that song. I mean, we literally added
South
Canada
Park,
to
yeah.
the watch list out of Ohio.
Yeah, South Park, Blame Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had images from that old movie where all the fishing boats cross from Britain to Germany. Like, are we going to get an armada and leave Cleveland to cross Lake Erie? I mean, these folks are, again, it goes back to the fundamental point. They're not about public service. They are not. There's no motivation, incentive to be public servants in these rigged systems. It's about extremism, and it's about corruption. And in some, by the way, we had also another thing come up the other day. They not only said armed teachers, they said reduce the hours of training to armed teachers from hundreds to a maximum of 24. Okay. It turns out the chairman of the committee that ran that bill through, and they had like hundreds of teachers testify against it. 2 people testified for it. The guy literally has a business that does gun training. And that's his business, and he's now, ramming. It doesn't disclose it, and that's the bill that goes through his committee. So much of this stuff is both corruption and extremism, and they're sort of inextricably linked. And also, with all of this comes a dramatic decline in most public outcomes you can measure. We're a case study. That's why I wrote that book. We're a case study of what happens when you lose your democracy in a state, at your state house level. The downward spiral is fast, and until you get in there and stop it, and I hate to say it, I wish it was only an Ohio story, but you're seeing it play out, in this horrific ways in Texas and Florida, the same story. And it's about a lack of democracy, because once you don't have the democracy, all the incentives that lead to good behavior in democracy are basically not just gone, they're flipped upside down.
No, and this is where I want to end up, because, the hearing tomorrow, the January 6th Commission's having their first hearing. And, I'm arguing that we're already in the throes of the end of democracy. We had a coup attempt. Nobody's been held really accountable for it. Yeah. I'm curious what you think tomorrow's going to bring, and do you think it's going to matter?
I hope it matters. We need we have an accountability crisis. These are people who, and we've seen it in Ohio, unless there's real accountability, they keep going. And worse than they keep going, they learn from their mistakes. If they can do it again because they were never held accountable, they'll do it better. They'll learn. One of the examples I put in my book is Senate Bill 5, the attack on collective bargaining here in Ohio, that was a disaster. One reason it lost was they included police and fire in that attack. Well, every other state down the road that attacked collective bargaining left out police and fire unions because they learned from why Ohio's failed. So lack of accountability doesn't just lead to them repeating what they did. They actually learn from whatever mistakes they made and do it better. And my worry about January 6th is they're already planning 2024. And the lesson they learned is don't wait so long that you have to attack the Capitol in the first place. Get to these, because that looks so illegitimate, it won't work. People will get cold feet. Get to these legislators long before, change who the Secretary of State are long before, get to the elections officials long before, make it so it never gets to January 6th. That's what they're doing.
Absolutely.
That Eastman memo wasn't burned up and thrown away. It's now being circulated in other ways to get this all. So my worry is unless you have real accountability, again, they're not just going to repeat it because that's what they do. They're going to be better at it. And so they need to be, very strong. And I am a big fan of a lot of people on this committee. And I hats off to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for making it bipartisan. But if there is not at some point soon real accountability, not just of the foot soldiers, but higher up the chain, I believe that that's catnip to these people. That they just will keep going. I would think at some point they laugh about it. My God, what do we have to do to be held accountable? But Trump's whole life has been that.
No, absolutely.
So I think this has to be gripping testimony, horrifying details, followed with real accountability for people who we all know the names of.
I'll tell you that. But David, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you.
Always. Thank you.
Good stuff. David Pepper, former Ohio chairman of the Democratic Party there. Also, make sure you check out the book, Laboratories of Autocracy. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Let's take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1904. That was the day that John Carley, a union miner, was shot down in Dunville, Colorado. Carley was part of a strike in the Cripple Creek gold mining region. The miners had gone out on strike in support of workers at the Standard Mill in Colorado City, which processed the mined ore. Colorado Governor Peabody was determined to break the strike. He called in the state militia, who joined forces with company Army gun thugs, with 1,000 rifles and 60,000 rounds of ammunition to back them up. General Sherman Bell, a veteran of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Rider Squad in the Spanish-American War, led the National Guard. During the strike, one of General Bell's deputies is said to have declared, "To hell with the Constitution! We aren't going by the Constitution." This pretty much summed up General Bell's approach to the conflict. The militia began to round up Union miners. More than 1,500 miners were captured and given a so-called trial by the militia. 238 of these miners were then deported from the region. They were shipped by train to Denver, Kansas, and New Mexico, and warned not to return. The militia learned of a group of pro-union workers at a small encampment known as Dunville. General Bell loaded up more than 100 militiamen and company deputies on a train and headed for the camp. There they exchanged gunfire with the miners. 65 miners, armed with just 10 guns among them, had little chance against the well-armed company men. John Carley was killed, and 14 miners were arrested. The Union was crushed in the sights of 1,000 guns. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So I'm looking forward to the big hearing, and it better be compelling. There better be a lot of evidence, a lot of A lot of information on the lies told by the Trump administration, the who's, the what's, the why's, the how's, all of that. And the money. It's the money. For me, follow the money. I said on January 6th, when all this went down, yeah, we're going to hold accountable all the people who defecated on the floor and broke windows and urinated on desks. We're going to get all the dupes and the idiots and the morons who stormed the Capitol and did that. I want the people who pushed them into it. I want the planners. I want the moneyed interest who bust them there. I want those folks. And I'm hoping that this goes into that. And we expose the names of the billionaires who funded this stuff, the people who took buses from, places like Pennsylvania and drove them down there. And we start talking about the crimes that they committed. And then going after all of the schemes and all of the things that they tried to pull, calling a Secretary of State in Georgia and trying to squeeze them for, hey, check the couch cushions. Maybe you can find some extra votes just laying around. And all of the stuff that went on. The sham attempts at investigations by the Justice Department. There's all this voter fraud out there. We heard Rudy Giuliani and the whole, cabal of crazy running around doing their 4-season landscaping press conferences. Never bothered to take any of those claims into a court of law, though. Tells you that they're not stupid. Some of my favorites. Let's seize all the voting machines. Rerun the elections. There's a lot of this stuff. We just need to delay the election. Because remember, as you're watching this, the goal of the whole day of January 6th was to stop the certification. Remember, stop the steal was the point. It was to stop the official certification of the election. It was to get Mike Pence into that car and get him on a plane somewhere out of town. Chuck Grassley was actually surprised. Couldn't believe he was there. There's got to be some of that stuff. And looking into, what exactly was planned and laying that out and laying it out in a very succinct way. We're going to have to walk through and spoon feed. Now, there's going to be some bingo games. There's going to be obviously some buzzword bingo. Coup, I think we're going to hear a lot. Treason, I think we're going to hear a lot. Trump lies, I think we're going to hear a lot. Because that's what was right in front of us. I do wonder how much Jenny Thomas is going to come up, the Supreme Court Justice's wife. And, there's some other intrigue going into this for me. Does Jared Kushner, does Kush stab Donald in the back? Does he save himself? How much of the testimony of the hundreds of witnesses that they talked to, how many of those people turned on Trump? What's amazing to me, there have been so few leaks out of this commission. There have been no leaks out of the Justice Department. That tells me, at least gives me hope, that there's really something happening. And out of this, and I'm hoping people will pay attention, which is why, again, as I said, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to broadcast as much of it as we can during our time so that we make sure our listeners at least get to hear what goes on during this. And we're going to have some commentary afterwards because I think it's that important. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I want to know what your thoughts are on this and what's going to be the buzzword coming out of it for you.
Get your stuff in order. Get ready for hurricane season.
While we were out, hurricane season kicks off on both coasts with Alex and Agatha. Atmospheric CO2 now at highest level in human history. Plus,
the president is going to invoke the Defense Production Act to manufacture more of these solar parts panels in the U.S.
Biden makes big moves on solar tariffs and clean energy.
All of those big moves and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They want to know when you're eating. They want to know if you're eating a cheeseburger, which is very bad because Bill Gates wants you to eat his fake meat that grows in a Peachtree dish.
Yes, he does. In a Peachtree dish. Once again, this is your Marjorie Taylor Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, just before we left, you warned everyone that hurricane season began on June 1, and now, sure enough, June is here. Boom, here come all the hurricanes.
Indeed. In the Pacific, Hurricane Agatha hit southern Mexico, setting a new record as the earliest Category 2 hurricane to hit the Pacific coast since record-keeping began in the 1940s. On the East Coast, Tropical Storm Alex, the first named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, hit Florida and Bermuda over the weekend, dumping a month's worth of rain in just 36 hours on Miami, causing widespread flooding that triggered sewer overflows and no swimming advisories.
And just to be clear, both of these were the A-named storms, and both of them made landfall.
Indeed.
Not a good sign.
It is forecast to be a busy hurricane season, and new research concludes that man-made global warming has contributed to a decisive increase in Atlantic hurricane activity over the last 40 years, doubling the risk of extreme seasons like we saw in 2020. While we were out, Russia halted natural gas shipments to the Netherlands for refusing Russia's new demand to pay in rubles to fund its invasion of Ukraine. The European Union agreed to phase out imports of Russian oil by the end of the year, but pipeline deliveries are exempt. That's a concession to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, but EU countries like Germany and Poland said they'll end those pipeline imports anyway.
Good.
Carbon dioxide has hit the highest levels in all of human history.
Not as good.
Thanks to humanity's burning of fossil fuels and further pushing the planet into conditions not experienced in millions of years. CO2 levels are now at 421 parts per million in the atmosphere. That's 50% higher than during the pre-industrial age, according to NOAA. There's now more CO2 in the atmosphere than at any time in at least 4 million years. CO2 is a primary driver of human-caused global warming and is already causing severe consequences.
421 parts per million?
Yes.
I'm old enough to remember when everyone was terrified that we would hit 400 parts per million.
And humanity is putting ever more CO2 into the atmosphere every single year. Some good news for things that breathe in Pennsylvania. The Biden EPA has moved to set more stringent limits on nitrous oxide pollution from 5 coal-fired generate toxic smog. The Biden Interior Department has approved the construction of a new 400-mile high-voltage transmission line to deliver clean, renewable energy across 3 western states, which is crucial to President Biden's goal of decarbonizing the U.S. electricity sector by 2035.
That's very cool. That means we can use solar power in one place and transport that electricity hundreds and hundreds of miles away.
Exactly.
Nice.
And finally, solar stocks rose after the Biden administration on Monday announced it will waive import tariffs on solar panels for 2 years. That move is related to a Commerce Department probe into possible trade violations by China that is the U.S. The Commerce Department is investigating whether China is dodging U.S. restrictions by dumping below-cost solar components into other Southeast Asian countries that then sell into the U.S. In a separate move, Biden also invoked the Defense Production Act to expand U.S. manufacturing of solar components, insulation for buildings, electric transformers for grid stability, and clean tech like electrolyzers and fuel cells. Biden also moved to increase domestic production of super-efficient, energy-saving, all-electric heat pumps. That was the brainchild of author and activist Bill McKibben. On a recent broadcast, McKibben said accelerating the switch to heat pumps undercuts Russia's energy blackmail by saving energy.
Anything that we can do to get even a few million homes off that gas before next October is a big blow to Putin.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that's finally happening at least. We ought to leave town more often. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of
think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday we talked about the report by the folks over at the Institute for Policy Studies. 670 to 1 CEO to worker pay. And like I said yesterday, and I'm sorry, I just don't see the average CEO out there doing the work of 670 employees. I don't see the CEO of Amazon doing as much work as the entire facility at JFK 8, but yet that's what they get paid. And somehow we've allowed that to happen and somehow weirdly justify it. And in this moment, I don't know how you do that coming out of the pandemic, but here we are. But here to share some thoughts on their most recent report, I've asked Sarah Anderson to come talk with us. She's the Global Economy Project Director over at the Institute for Policy Studies, also the co-editor at inequality.org. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So I'm looking at this new report, and last year the numbers were bad. The year before the numbers were bad. This year, coming out of the pandemic, worse. CEO pay in these 300 companies that you looked at jumped, what you're saying, 31% raise our CEOs got. I gotta wonder, is this contributing to inflation?
Yeah, it is just pure insanity. And like you said, at a time of the pandemic, when low-wage workers have been doing such heroic work, taking a lot of risks to keep our economy going, you'd think that big corporations would do a bit of a rethink about their pay practices and start questioning whether it really makes sense to pay that guy in the corner office hundreds, sometimes thousands of times what their typical workers make. And yet, what we saw last year as the economy started to recover, that was a moment when they really had an opportunity to help narrow these gaps, put a lot more money into workers' pockets. And instead, they still fixated on inflating CEO pay. So we had these just insane numbers. We looked at the 300 companies with the lowest median worker pay. And like you said, CEO pay rose 31%. And at about, I think it's about 40% of these companies, median worker pay didn't even keep pace with inflation. So workers were actually losing ground.
My question is, as I was reading through your study and I was looking at the numbers and just getting angrier and angrier because we've got a horrible tax code that rewards this kind of opulence and this kind of greed, I couldn't help but remember back to August 18th of 2019. And I couldn't help but wonder how many of these top 300 CEOs were sitting on the business roundtable at the time when they had that grand epiphany. Maybe you remember August 18th, 2019, when they came out with that letter about how, it's no longer only about us. It's no longer only about making shareholders wealthier. It's no longer about greed. We now care about customers. We're going to start caring about consumers. And most laughably, they were going to start caring about workers again. They were going to care. And they had a whole big kind of thing. And well, then the pandemic hit and they showed us that was all BS. How many of those CEOs of the 300 were of those CEOs who signed on to that letter, do you think?
Oh, I'm sure a lot of them were. And when that came out, we definitely took it with a grain of salt and waited to see how they would actually put that in practice. And it's a joke now when you think about it. The first year of the pandemic, a lot of these companies were having a tough time financially. What did the boards do? They fixated on protecting the CEOs. they rejiggered their bonus rules, or they came up with fancy new bonuses to make sure that CEOs were protected while their workers were out there risking their lives, losing income, losing jobs. And in 2021, profits started rising, and instead of turning things around, what a lot of them did was throw money into stock buybacks. And this is just a legal form of stock manipulation to inflate the value of their shares, to further enrich their wealthy shareholders and their CEOs, who get most of their pay in some kind of stock-based pay. And when you're throwing money at stock buybacks, that's money that's not going into worker raises or other things that would be good for the company in the long term, like investing in new infrastructure or research and development and that kind of thing. So, that whole BS, as you said, about how they were going to take a broader stakeholder approach has really turned into just a joke, looking at how they've handled the pandemic.
So you hit on one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts. And anybody who listens to this show longer than 15 minutes knows that stock buybacks have been one of my whipping boys for the longest time, because we were told if we give them massive tax breaks, if we continue to cut tax rates down to where they are now and give them all of this wealth, all of this money, they're smart people. They know what they do to do with the money, and it's eventually going to all, what's that phrase that they used to use?
Trickle down.
That's it. Yeah, that was going to trickle down like rivers of gold and honey. It was going to be wonderful, like manna from heaven. It was going to be amazing. And yet what they're now admitting is there's no manna. There's not even, the stuff that's salty and yellow. We have no productive use for this money other than to, buy our shares back.
Right.
They don't know what to do with it anymore. There's nothing they can do with it.
Let me give you the most extreme example from our report, which is Lowe's, the home improvement chain. They spent $13 billion on stock buybacks last year. And with that amount of money, they could have given every one of their 325,000 employees a $40,000 raise. So we are talking about just massive funneling of money into stock buybacks. That does nothing for the workers.
So they could have lived their values that they touted on August 18th, 2019 about caring about their workers. They just chose not to. They chose to enrich themselves. And I blame our tax code for this. And I get a lot of people saying, no, it's not something that simple. I think it's that simple. If we could go find and get a shovel and dig up the spirit of the good socialist president, Dwight David Eisenhower, and come up with that tax code where these corporate criminals are making this $10.6 million a year, we start taxing them at 92% like they were back then, I think a lot of things would change.
Yeah, there would be no incentive to give somebody $10 million if almost all of that was going to be taxed away. And so that's why during the Eisenhower era of those really high top marginal tax rates, you didn't have CEO pay levels that were hundreds or thousands of times more than what workers were making. And you had CEOs, giving press conferences to brag about when they were going to be hiring new jobs and creating new jobs in the United States. And that really changed decades later. There's a new book that I haven't read yet, but it's about Jack Welch, the CEO of GE. And he was the guy who would brag about how many jobs he was sending outside the country. And he, the author is a New York Times reporter, said it was Jack Welch who really started this trend of massive spending on buybacks and just finding every tactic he could to offshore as many U.S. jobs, not just of GE, but he pressured all of their suppliers to also move jobs to low-wage countries where workers often don't have basic labor rights. So the past several decades has really been that model. And it's the way they defend it is by claiming that, well, we just have to pay these guys, the sky's the limit, because that's what's needed to retain the top talent. And they even said that with a straight face after these executives drove our economy off a cliff in 2008, and use it to defend all kinds of misbehavior by people at the top. And I think, we just shouldn't pretend anymore that we can rely on companies to do the right thing when it comes to these outrageous gaps between CEO and worker pay. We need to have responsible government policy to come in. Changing the tax code would be a great thing, like you mentioned. There are other things that President Biden could do that he wouldn't even have to wait for Congress to act. Congress does have to pass tax changes, but Biden could send a strong message by using the power of the public purse and putting conditions on federal contractors, who, by the way, employ like 25% of the U.S. Private sector workforce. So it's a big part of corporate America. And he could put conditions on those federal contractors to limit their CEO to worker pay gaps, to stop doing the stock buybacks, to require them to be neutral in union organizing so they're not out there union busting like we've seen so much of lately. And so there are things that government can do about this problem. And I really think it's time to act instead of thinking like, the Business Roundtable statement is somehow going to become real someday.
Yeah, that's never going to happen, because ultimately the CEO's job is to maximize shareholder wealth, to make himself and the shareholders wealthier. That's his job, and he's very, very honest about that. It's not about making, as Elon Musk says, it's not about them making us happy, which I love. Are you finding it as interesting as I am, Musk trying to remake The Billionaire today? Because evidently billionaires make us happy.
I don't know about that. And I also think, even if all you cared about was good business practices, what would make for a healthy business over the long term, it's not having these extreme pay gaps. There's a lot of research that shows that when the guy at the top is making hundreds of times more than workers, it doesn't bring out the best in those employees. Surprise, surprise. It's demoralizing. It's humiliating. And that can lower productivity and increase turnover rates. And I think it's no surprise that we're seeing this surge of unionization efforts and these record quit rates, because after the pandemic, people are more aware of the value of their work, and that people at all levels of these companies are contributing to the value of their employers, and not just the guy in the corner office. And they're really fed up. And the polling on this is amazing. There's a poll just came out by Just Capital that shows that 87% of Americans think that these gaps are a problem. And even 65% of Republicans would favor a cap on CEO pay relative to worker pay. So people are really fed up, and I'm just hoping that the administration will hear all this outrage and try to do something about it.
Yeah, see, for me, this is where we have that top marginal tax rate. Sorry, you're going to make over $2 million a year. We're going back to 90% tax rates. Sorry, that we can. The kind of power that we give these CEOs and these wealthy people way outweighed than we, the working people. It's just obscene. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Anderson. She is the Global Economy Project Director at the Institute for Policy Studies, also co-editor of inequality.org. We're talking about their new report titled Executive Excess, where they have found that in the 300 companies that they looked at, their CEOs have seen a 670 to 1 worker to CEO pay rate. Just mind-blowing to me, Sarah, that it is this outrageous, considering that when my grandparents just 50, 60 years ago, when they were in their working lives, it was like 20 to 30 to 1. And how just completely out of hand in a couple of generations this has gotten. So kind of the last.
It's not because the CEOs have just gotten all that much smarter. They're hundreds of times smarter than they were back in your grandparents' era. There's no connection between CEO pay and CEO performance. It's just people on these corporate boards who have selfish interests for keeping CEO pay extremely high and perpetuating this ridiculous idea that the CEO is almost single-handedly responsible for corporate value, when we all know that people at the lower levels of companies who are often so underpaid are doing some of the most heroic and essential work in our economy.
Yeah, but I blame us, and this is where I'm gonna turn this a little. I blame us, the working people, because my grandparents' generation, the greatest generation, the people who came out of the Depression, I don't think they would have put up with it. I don't think they would have tolerated the kind of treatment that we've got. They came back from World War II fighting fascism overseas, and they took to the factory floors and they fought to build the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. They would never have put up with the kind of obscenity that we see in a CEO like at Amazon, 6,475 to 1. That's the number that you've got, 6,474 to 1. CEO to worker pay ratio. That is just obscene. So I blame us in not demanding our elected leaders to deal with this and to do something about it. And to me, it's the tax code. It's the procurement. It's so many of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm with you in like blaming working people for everything. A lot of other things have changed. It became easier to shift jobs around the world and pit workers in different countries against each other, and other changes that have made it raised the obstacles to acting collectively and really pushing for your fair share. But I think you're onto something that people in that generation, my parents were in that too, coming out of World War II, there was a bit of a greater sense of solidarity, and we're in this thing together, and let's try to make the country better. As obviously that's it wasn't for everybody. There are certainly people who are still very much discriminated against, people of color and women and all. It wasn't a perfect era, but in that post World War II era, we did see much more egalitarian tax policies. We had things like the GI Bill that opened up a lot of opportunities for people, and other policies that really helped build the middle class. And we need to fight even harder, I guess, to bring that back than they had to back then.
Without question in my mind. But Sarah, great report. I appreciate the work that you guys do. I hope everybody takes a look at it, internalizes it, and then when they go to vote, start throwing the bums out that created this and defend it. Executive Excess is the report by the folks at the Institute for Policy Studies. We'll get links out on social media. Sarah, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great stuff. Again, make sure you check this out. We'll get links out on social media. You can check out their work. It blows my mind. 6,474 to 1. One guy making the same wealth as almost 6,500 people. And somehow they think that, now remember, those were 6,500 people who are essential. Frontline heroes. Wow. Quick break, right back.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the thing that infuriates me is you hear all this talk about inflation. It's those workers, them demanding those paltry wages. That's what's driving inflation. That's it. And we know that's not it. The wage increases that they've gotten haven't even really kept up with inflation. But whose wages have gone well beyond those 300 CEOs, their wages went up 31%. 31%. Do you think that contributed a little bit to inflation? Do you think the massive corporate profits, the kind of profits we haven't seen, I don't know, since the 50s, do you think that has something to do with it? Yeah. Do you think the reality is that all these corporations keep raising their prices? Do you think because, hey, inflation's coming, do you think that's got something to do with it? Because we keep hearing, it's all because Joe Biden gave $1,400 to everybody. That's the reason. It's all because, the bottom 50% saw their wealth increase a little bit. Because we didn't give all the money to the very wealthy. Because for a very short period of time, people didn't have to pay their student loans. They were able to, save a little bit of money because, they got to catch their breath. And my favorite, their tariffs on all those goods that come in from China. It's the tariffs that are doing the inflation. Except, energy prices are what's killing us. And look, that's very real. And out of the pandemic, you had these oil companies who basically stopped producing. During the pandemic, they basically stopped. They had nowhere to put it. And that wasn't really their fault. But they didn't ramp up fast enough, and they're not in a hurry to ramp up. Because guess what? Shockingly so, guess what? I know this is going to be hard to believe. They're actually pretty happy where things are. They're actually pretty happy, not having to produce so much and making enormous profits off of what they are. They're actually pretty happy. And of course, they're happy because, they can blame someone else. Now, I would argue all of these CEOs are probably pretty thrilled that they're not taking the arrows because it's all going to Biden. And look, this isn't Biden's doing. It is his problem. And Democrats had better figure this out soon because this is a problem for them. Just like back when, after 9/11, Bush had a real problem with the economy. If you remember, he was out there begging people to go shopping. Your patriotic duty is not to, sign up to join the military, not to do, no, your patriotic duty back then, go shopping. Now the patriotic duty, don't go shopping because you're driving inflation. And I argue, had we been doing all of the things we should have been doing on the energy front for the last 30 years, had we been moving away from the dirty stuff, had we been moving away from fossil fuels for the last 30, 40 years, we wouldn't be in this mess. Had we broken our dependence on oil, wouldn't be in this mess. And nobody's ever brought that up. The Reagan pulling the solar panels off the White House, all of the Republican policies to ensure that we don't invest in green energy or new technology. We don't talk about that, man. None of that. And we should be. We should be pursuing that. And we should be doing it now. The sooner we get off of this, hopefully the sooner we're no longer dependent. I mean, Biden's going to be going to Saudi Arabia, begging to help our economy. It's mind-blowing to me. Absolutely mind-blowing. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you grab the podcast. You can get that at the website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Going to take a quick break right here. When we come back and talk about the gun issue, again, I'm hoping. I'm always hopeful. We'll see. Quick break, right back.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith. So
you got to love Texas Representative Pat Fallon. I've heard a lot of things. Heard a lot of stuff. It's the video games. It's rap music. Now, evidently, gun violence. It's all about the smartphones. Evidently, overuse of those dang smartphony thingies. That's the reason for all the gun violence. Again, not the guns. No. They are harmless. Innocent, I tell you. It's now the smartphones. So we had the video games, we had the music, the drugs. Everyone's on drugs. They're all on some kind of thing. And now the dreaded smartphone. Yes, they were texting their friends too much. Wow. You kind of got to wonder. Strange, bizarre times. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, is this time different? I know Joe Manchin said so, but he also said the same thing back in 2013 when Lucy pulled the football away from us the last time. But here to share some thoughts on if this time truly is different. I've asked Eladio Babadia to come talk with us. Eladio is a professor at the University of Kentucky, a historian, someone who works on social movements and the working class, currently finishing his first book on the history of immigrant rights movements. He's also beginning work on two other projects, one on the rise of Trump-era nativism and the other on the history of left-wing armed community/self-defense movements. Eladio, thanks for taking some time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start with this spot. Joe Manchin said this time's different. There are some things that he would support. I'm liking it to Lucy and the football again. I guess I've been tricked so many times by Joe Manchin that I'm a little once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah, I have similar thoughts and feelings about this. I would have thought that after Sandy Hook, it would have been different. I thought that moment when we saw the horror of little children being slaughtered, right? That time that would have been different. And here we are again, children and teachers being slaughtered. So I'm not so sure. I would like to think that something will change, that there's something fundamentally different about this. But like you, I feel like we've been screwed so many times, and we've been lied to so many times. I'm not sure that it is going to be all that different.
Now, here's the thing. I'm a gun owner. I know a lot of gun owners. I'm not a gun grabber. I'm not someone who says there should be no guns. We need to eliminate. I'm not one of those guys. But there seems to be a common denominator in most of these shootings, and it seems like a common sense kind of thing that the easy response to go, you know what? Do we really need these weapons of war in the hands of so many people? Do we need to have these high capacity magazines? Do we need to have these rounds that do just enormous amounts of damage to human flesh? I mean, there's part of me that goes, there's some simple stuff here that could be done. I'm curious where your positions are.
Yeah, like you, I'm a gun owner. I have a complex relationship, I guess, with the issue. I believe in the right of people to have guns with reasonable restrictions. But yeah, what we're seeing is no restrictions. What we're seeing is that just about anybody can get their hands on the most destructive weapons ever invented, and the result is what we've seen. It's hundreds of mass shootings a year, and there's no there's interestingly no common definition about what a mass shooting is, what it looks like, but by even the most conservative estimates, we have dozens of shootings a year. Again, by some of the more liberal definitions, we have hundreds. And we have seen, again, the full potential of these weapons, the horrors of unrestricted gun rights. And again, I keep coming back to this. I would have thought that after the first time we saw kids get murdered, little children. We can go back to Columbine and think about those kids, and they were kids. But even when we have small children, massacred in huge numbers, we've done nothing. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if what would it take? Again, I would think that little kids being murdered would be it. Then we would say that's enough. Once.
But Eladio, if I could stop you, you have
Yeah,
a most recent poll come out that says 44% of Republican voters say that that's just the cost of living in a free society. It's the cost of having the Second Amendment, because you say reasonable restrictions. I know a lot of my gun friends are saying there should be no restrictions. I should be able to have whatever I want, and yet once you ferret down that hole, everybody believes in gun control. It's where we draw the line. And this is where this discussion, I think, should be had. Where do we draw this line? Because nobody wants me to have a thermonuclear weapon. Nobody wants me to have a stealth bomber. Nobody wants me to have a surface-to-air missile. Nobody wants me to have those things, and nor should we have them. So we all believe in gun control in one form or another. It's where do we draw? Where is that reasonable restriction at? I think is where we should have the conversation.
And we're not having it, right? There's no conversation, because for the people in the pockets of the NRA or vice versa, right? They don't want to have a conversation. We could have a reasonable conversation in this country about, well, what does the Second Amendment actually say? What does it mean? What does it mean in 2022, right? It's not the 18th century anymore. Weapons look different. The context in which these weapons exist is fundamentally different. But to me, the most enraging thing is that we're not having these conversations, and most Republicans don't want to have them. Even after, again, I keep coming back to this, after seeing small children in a school being murdered in huge numbers, and we're not even willing to have a conversation about what does this mean to us today? What should we do about this? To them, it seems like nothing, right? We shouldn't do anything.
Is it that we're not seeing it, though, Eladio? I mean, because now there's a conversation happening of, should we be showing the bodies of these executed children? Should we see the horrible damage? I mean, we heard Matthew McConaughey give his presentation yesterday, where he's talking about the little girl with the green Converse tennis shoes, and that was the only way that child was identifiable.
Right.
That parents had to bring DNA so that their children could be identified. Is that possibly something you would support? Showing the brutalized bodies, the executed bodies of children in public, that maybe that would wake us. I'm curious, a thought there.
There was a time where I thought that maybe would be helpful in some way. That if we actually saw the carnage, we might do something about it. I'm less and less convinced by that. I feel like, we know what happened. Do we really need to see it? I don't know that it would make a difference. I think all of us, especially those of us who have kids, have had these horrific thoughts pass through our minds, and we can imagine, right, what this was like. We don't necessarily need to see it. I don't think we need. If we've gotten to the point where that's what it takes, there are other, issues here that we need to talk about. If to move the needle even a tiny bit, we need to put the disembodied, body parts of children in a classroom. If that's what it's going to take to even have a conversation, I don't know that would do it. I don't know that there's anyone anywhere that would change their minds.
Yeah. See, my fear goes the other way. Eladio, goes much further. I believe we're such a sick society. I believe there are so many people who get their thing from misery porn. That this might actually encourage more carnage and more destruction and more loss of human life, because that would be their goal. And that sounds really sadistic and sick, but I think we're that kind of society in this moment. And again, what we're talking about is not the gun. Again, what the right is masterful at doing, what the gun crowd is masterful, is getting us talking about everything else. Bulletproof backpacks, single door schoolhouses, you name it. It's everything. It's every other distraction. It's all of this other stuff. Instead of talking about, how do we stop this carnage from happening? And I know we can't stop every bad thing from happening, but you know what? Maybe we can stop some crazed person or someone from going into a school with the kind of firepower that would make you, me, anyone else completely incapable of defending ourselves, even if we had a little pea shooter on our side.
Right. I think if we're talking about what could we do, what would it take to actually move this conversation? This is going to sound strange, maybe to some of your listeners, but I think there actually is one thing that would move this conversation, and people think I'm facetious when I say this, or that I'm mocking either liberals or the far right. I'm not, but we actually have a playbook, right? I often ask my students about when I talk about gun control, where is gun control most stringent? Where do we have strong gun control laws? California. They all know this. What they don't know is why a lot of the times. And the why is because Black people started arming themselves in the 1960s. The Black Panthers in Northern California, in Oakland, right? They were tired of being harassed. They were tired of their communities being abused. They armed themselves with what they viewed as their constitutional right. And within a year, we have gun control laws in California to restrict gun ownership. The irony, of course, is that then the NRA, which actually supported gun control, the guy who led the efforts, Don Mulford, it was very clear at the time that this law couldn't have passed without the support of the NRA. He thanked them profusely and repeatedly for their work on gun control. And then, of course, the irony is that then they spend decades trying to undo the gun control laws that they created to ensure that Black people couldn't arm themselves. So I think if liberals actually wanted to pass gun control laws, they should encourage Black people, brown people, immigrants, queer people to arm themselves. Now, I'm not suggesting this. I think that would be, more guns is not the answer. But I think that's what it would take, I guess is what I'm saying, is if we actually encouraged gun ownership to be something that's not the monopoly of the far right, of right-wing white people in this country, we actually might, get something on the books. Is that going to happen? I don't think so. Again, is that the answer? I don't think that more guns is the answer. But I've gotten to this point where I think that is really the only way that we would actually get some form of gun control is if, and this has started to happen, right? Since 2016, more Black people and more brown people and more, queer people. There are gun clubs now, left-wing gun clubs, and they're growing, but nothing like the right. I mean, the right, has made this their issue for so long that when we think about guns, we think about far right and generally conservative people. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that there would be any other way to actually move the needle other than if the right came to see that other people were arming themselves. I think that would actually do it.
No, I remember, a couple years back, you had, it was like 1,000 African-American men, who marched up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, all armed. And the shock that came out of that. And I said, this is the way forward. If you want to stop some of this stuff, this is what has to be done. There has to be this kind of mobilization. And liberals, you've got to start buying guns too. No question about it. I'm with you on this. But but you're right. And my problem comes back to more guns don't keep us safe. More guns make us less safe, because we know statistically, and you know better than anyone, a gun in the home is more likely people are going to die. Higher death rates from guns, and not from mass shootings, people going to shooting up schools, but suicide, accidents, you name it, bad things happen.
Yeah, and in fact, we often hear about the most sensationalistic mass shootings, but most of what can be considered mass shootings actually happen in private homes. So over 90%. I think it's actually quite a bit higher than 90%, but it's at least 90%. I'm forgetting the figure exactly, but these things happen, and domestic violence is a huge issue. Things getting out of hand and like house party, that's the kind of thing that actually happens all the time, and we don't hear about it. It's become such a normal part of American life that it takes something as horrific as Sandy Hook or what happened in Uvalde actually making the news.
Now let me ask you this, Eladio, because I get a lot of my gun friends who say, well, these shootings, while horrible, while tragic, while horrific, while throw the word in there you want, they're not as frequent as every weekend in Chicago or Philadelphia or you name the major Democrat city.
Right.
And what they really mean is they mean minority city.
Yeah.
Because that's the dog whistle.
Right.
They're not entirely wrong. We do have high crime rates in a lot of major cities, or is that the wrong frame?
I think it is the wrong frame, and it's the wrong frame because it again sort of skews the issue, right? Everyone on the right love the moment you talk about gun control and gun laws and crime. Chicago, right? Baltimore, scary places where Black people live, and yeah, it is a problem there. Even that's also often framed incorrectly. Like Chicago is not by any means the most violent city in the country, but it is a large city with a crime problem and with a gun problem. The problem is a lot of these guns are coming from out of state, for places where it is incredibly easy to get a gun. So they point to Chicago and say, well, gun control hasn't worked in Chicago. Illinois has somewhat stringent gun laws. True. But these guns are not being bought in Chicago. They're not being bought in Illinois. They're being bought elsewhere and then brought into that violence that already exists.
And this is where if you had a nationwide, kind of a tightening, it would be better. Is that the argument?
I think so. I mean, you look at this last shooter, and again, you can kind of see maybe one way that this could have been prevented is this guy on his 18th birthday. It seems that from the reports that I've seen is when he bought this weapon. What might happen if we raise the age to 21 or hell 25? Right? You can't rent a car until you're 25, but you can buy a gun on your 18th birthday. Would that have given us some time would that have bought us some time to figure out what this guy was doing? Would he have committed some minor crime that would have put him, on a list somewhere that would have prevented him from later buying a gun? I don't know, but it seems like it would be worth trying, right? To ensure that not anybody can just go buy a gun at any time they want, any type of gun. And of course there are larger issues too. There's the culture that breeds this gun fanaticism is, I think, the bigger issue for me than just the guns, right? Yeah. It's become a religious issue. I mean, literally, there are some of these gun manufacturers are putting Bible verses on their guns and making it this religious thing that is utterly terrifying.
No, I don't disagree with you, but here's the thing, and I've talked about this, numerous times here on the program. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. When you saw someone with a gun, run, somebody's going to die. I've seen people shot. I've seen people die. I've seen the life come out of somebody, as you could see the bubbles of oxygen coming out of the hole in their chest. I now live in a neighborhood where you see someone with a gun. They're probably going to the free gun range with their son, or they're going to go hunting, or they're going to do something in a more positive way. Mm-hmm. There's a different culture. There are very different culture and different uses. So I do understand that there are differences, that there are family legacies of passing, guns down from generation to generation. I do understand some of that. Also, I do understand that there is a fanaticism that is very scary, that there are people who maybe we don't want having an arsenal. Mm-hmm. There are people that, having 10, 15,000 rounds of ammunition stockpiled because they're waiting for, the next civil war. Maybe we should be concerned about them as a part of our society, because that's not home defense. That's something a little bit more. Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, I mean, I worry that this sort of mentality and this culture is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They're waiting for it. In some ways, some of the more extreme elements are excited about this. They want violence, right? They envision themselves as being the protectors of their home and of sometimes of whiteness, of white civilization. And I mean, yeah, the more guns we have, the more ammunition, the more anxiety about everything, the more us versus them mentality. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And again, you didn't see this kind of thing to this degree, at least from the research that I've done earlier in the century. This really becomes a problem in the 70s, 80s, as the NRA becomes this massive organization that's devoted to almost, like I said, religious fervor around guns. This ideological tool. It's not just a tool of self-defense. It's not a hunting tool. It's an ideological tool. And that's what scares me the most. I mean, I think that it has become much more than that, much more than a right to keep your home safe, than a right to go hunting. And I have no problem with people hunting. I have no problem with people having a gun for self-defense, right? I have one. I consider it important. Again, I know the statistics, and so I've been very careful about how I store my gun. I have a child in the home. It seems like these are conversations we should be having, right? Can you responsibly have a gun in your home? Can you be trusted with a weapon, right? Do you know how to use a weapon properly? Those conversations are thrown right out the window when we're talking about people with dozens of assault rifles, with entire arsenals, with thousands of rounds of ammunition. That's not normal. That is not a healthy society. That's not what we do in a democratic, pluralistic, healthy society. It is sick.
It's something we absolutely have to deal with. Last, I want to get your thought, because Texas Republican John Cronin said he believes that there's going to be legislation. He believes the Gang of 10 are going to produce something that Biden's going to be able to sign. Are you hopeful that whatever they come forth with, if they come forth with something, that it's going to be something that's going to matter?
Well, I always want to be hopeful, right? I hope that something does change. My concern is that whatever gets passed, if anything gets passed, it's going to be something with no teeth. And then the next time this happens, the Republicans are going to say, see, it doesn't work. And so never again should we have any restrictions. So I think it's a tricky, issue. We want to get something passed, but it has to be meaningful. I mean, it has to actually do something. It can't just be some piece of legislation that doesn't actually address any of the underlying issues, or else what we're going to end up with is more of the same. And again, I think that the more that this sort of thing happens, this could backfire, right? You could have Republicans saying, see, we passed something and it didn't work, so we will not do that again. I see this with immigration all the time. We're not talking about immigration today, but the last time we passed real immigration reform was in the 1980s. And part of the reason is that it didn't do what really anyone wanted. But people on the right kept saying, see, we should never again give any rights to undocumented people. This doesn't work. So, I'm skeptical. I want to be hopeful. I'll be hopeful that this really did change the minds of some people. And the thing is, it has changed the minds of a lot of Americans. I mean, if you look at the policy evolution, polls, people are increasingly more open to gun control and gun legislation. The vast majority of Americans want limits on, what kinds of guns are out there, who can buy guns. The problem is that it doesn't seem to matter, right? Those in Congress don't listen to Americans on this or really any other issue.
You got that right, on this or anything else. But we definitely need some gun sanity, and let's hope that something gets done. But Eladio, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Love to talk to you again real soon. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Eladio Baadia. He is a professor at the university, assistant professor at the University of Kentucky in their history department. Make sure you check out his website, EladioBaadia.com. We'll get links out on social media. This way you'll be able to take a look at it. Quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Rick Smith here, host of The Rick Smith Show. Father's Day is just around the corner. And if your dad is as hard to find a gift for as my wife and kids claim that I am, here's a little gift-giving wisdom from our friends at Omaha Steaks. Dads want steaks. It's true. We do. Every holiday in my house, it's the same thing. Dad, what do you want for this holiday? And, I always give the same thing. Give me a hug and spend a little time with me. I don't need ties or cologne or any of that stuff. And now, thanks to Omaha Steaks, they ask, Dad, what do you want? Steaks. Give me the Dads Want Steaks package. Just go to omahasteaks.com, type Rick Smith in the search bar, and order the Dads Want Steaks package. And for just $99, this limited time package includes 16 mouth-watering entrees that I love, and I guarantee he'll love too. The smoky, tender, bacon-wrapped filet mignons, the gourmet jumbo franks, their air-chilled, boneless chicken breast, and of course my favorite, the thick, delicious, boneless pork chops. And to finish it off, the sweet finish of it all, the delicious caramel apple tartlets. And as a special gift for my listeners, when you type Rick Smith in the search bar and order the Dads Want Steaks package, you'll also get 8 free Omaha Steaks burgers. These are awesome. You throw them on the grill, cook them to perfection. These burgers are full of bold, beefy flavor, made from 100% Omaha steaks, and now they're bigger than ever, a whopping 6 ounces. So this Father's Day, don't wait. Send Dad more than just a gift. Send him an experience he'll love and can share with you. In fact, don't just order one. Get 2 Dads Want Steaks packages. One for him and one he can share with you. Just go to omahasteaks.com and type Rick Smith in the search bar and get the Dads Want Steaks package. You won't regret it. I guarantee it. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. I got to tell you, I'm hoping Eladio's right. I'm hoping that this time will be different. I'm hoping there's something. I'm hoping that something gets done so that we don't have to keep going through this. That parents don't have to keep worrying that their children aren't going to be safe going to school. I mean, I think back to when I was a kid. The worst thing we worried about was getting beat up on the way home from school. Now my kid's worried about not coming home at all. And look, this is where we've got to, as sane, rational, thoughtful citizens, we've got to be contacting our representatives. We've got to be pushing forward, demanding action. This is that moment. And it's going to take all of us. Because, this is where when you start having conversations with people are like, yeah, we demand some action. Nobody's talking about going house to house, knocking on doors, taking people's guns. Nobody's talking about that, except for the alarmists. This is the slippery slope. This is how it starts. First, they say I can't have a 100-round magazine with, semi-automatic. First they say I can't have this toy, and then it's nobody's talking about that. I look at that video that I talked about yesterday with that Rittenhouse kid shooting off a fully automatic weapon, and I couldn't help but think, is that what the founders had in mind when they wrote the Second Amendment? That kid with that weapon. Do you think that they really, when they wrote that amendment, do you think that's what they had in mind? And the answer is, hell no. Never in a million years. Never in a million years. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, Rick at ricksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program or any of our programs, make sure you download the podcast. Get that wherever you get your podcast, or just go to thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next time. Tomorrow on the program, big hearing. We're going to air the hearings live. So we'll be back afterwards with some commentary. Thanks for being here.
Listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.